Today, I'm going to talk to you guys about why I chose the Fujifilm X100V over the Fujifilm X-T4 for wedding photography and my personal work. What's up guys, Reggie B Photo here and welcome back to the channel. So for those of you who are new, my name is Reggie Ballesteros and I'm a wedding photographer based in the San Francisco Bay Area. So at the end of my long-term review of the Fujifilm X-T4, I concluded with a small wish list of future X-T4 firmware updates, as well as features that I wanted to be included in the new X-T4. So to recap, as far as firmware updates, I wanted better and faster low light autofocus, and I also wanted a shutter angle priority mode for my video work. And as far as my wish list for the future X-T4, I really wish they reduced the megapixel count of the sensor for better low light performance and ISO performance. I also wanted them to make a better battery, and aside from that, that's all I really wanted them to add into the next iteration of the XT series cameras. So now that the X-T4 has been officially announced with all the features and specs released out to the public, and now that the X100V is about to be shipping soon to stores, I'm going to share my reasons for ultimately choosing the X100V over the X-T4 for my professional wedding photography and my personal work. So first, let's talk about the sensor and the processor. Both the X100V and the X-T4 have the same sensor and processor as the X-T3, with the only caveat being that the X-T3 does not have the same firmware features that these other two new cameras have. As I just mentioned, my wish was that the X-T4 would have a newer sensor with a reduced megapixel count, so that the low light and high ISO performance and image quality would be better, and hopefully some increased dynamic range. But since the X-T4 and the X100V have the same sensor as the X-T3, it's pretty safe to assume that the image quality and the low light performance of these two cameras will be about the same as the X-T3 right now. And closely related to the sensor and processor is the autofocus performance of these cameras. As a wedding photographer, I'm always welcoming faster autofocus and better autofocus in low light. And as far as face and eye tracking goes, it's not something that I necessarily rely on, but it's nice to have if it gets implemented in a more robust form later on. And Fuji brought improved face and eye tracking recently to the X-T3 in the latest 3.2 firmware update, and so far it seems like it's a promising improvement, but I've yet to test it in an actual wedding situation just yet. So moving on to these new cameras, both the X-T4 and the X100V look to have improved autofocus, especially in the low light department, with a -6 EV sensitivity for the X-T4 and a -5 EV sensitivity for the X100V. And this is compared to the X-T3's sensitivity of -3 EV. And from this official announcement, the X-T4 is supposed to have a significant autofocus improvement. I'm assuming it's going to be the best out of the X-series cameras at this point by doubling the tracking success compared to the X-T3, and also they're stating that they've dramatically improved the face and eye detection. And this is really tempting for wedding photography. Originally, I was hoping that the X-T3 was going to get the -6 EV AF sensitivity bump through a firmware update after the release of the X Pro 3, but the jury is still out on that. And I guess right now I'm crossing my fingers that the X-T3 will get those X-T4 autofocus capabilities down the road through a firmware update as well. I mean, it's not impossible because the X-T3 shares the same sensor and processor. It's just a matter of if Fuji will flow these features down to the X-T3, because I'm not sure if they're worried about cannibalizing the X-T4 sales if they give all the features to the X-T3 as well. But at the end of the day, I've proven it to myself from last year's wedding season and the work that I've been producing that the X-T3 can definitely hold its own for wedding photography, and if future firmware updates do get better autofocus, it can only get better from there. So the next thing I want to talk about is size. So for wedding photography, small size and form factor was never a huge importance to me, but for my personal work and taking photos of my family, it is a huge side benefit. So the X-T4 is slightly bigger and heavier than the X-T3, and while this isn't a complete deal breaker, it is a negative that needs to be accounted for. As far as the X100V, its size is a complete game changer for me, specifically because it has all the guts, the image quality, and slightly better autofocus performance than the X-T3. And even better, it's paired with my favorite and most used focal length for wedding photography in a much more compact form factor. So we're talking about the 23mm focal length. This is a big positive for not only my personal work, but it also opens up the doors for some light use in my weddings and portraiture work, especially during those times when being discreet and quiet would be an advantage. And this leads me to my next point of discussion, which is the shutter. So the X-T3 and the new X-T4 both have traditional mechanical shutters, with the X-T4's being advertised that it has a 30% quieter shutter, but the X100V and all the other X100 series cameras have their infamous leaf shutter. And the leaf shutter is a mechanical shutter that is ultra quiet. Like, it is really quiet. And another awesome benefit is that this leaf shutter has an increased sync speed when it comes to flash photography. So earlier adopters of the first X100 series cameras who did a lot of off-camera flash work, like David Hobby and Zach Arias, touted of this feature as a huge benefit for those who do off-camera flash work in the field. So this will actually be a big benefit to add to my wedding photography toolbox, as I have no plans on adding any huge lights to my kit for those times when overpowering the sun might be necessary. So the high-speed sync will definitely help me here. Alright, now moving on to everyone's favorite topic is Ibis, in-body image stabilization. One of the big improvements with the X-T4 is the addition of Ibis. And for a lot of you, this is all you really needed to hear to be on board to upgrading to the X-T4. But if you're familiar with me and my channel and how I work, you already know how I feel about Ibis when it comes to my style of wedding photography and just my style of photography in general. In short, Ibis addresses camera shake, but it does nothing to address the motion blur of the subject. And for my line of work, which is wedding photography, portraiture, and taking photos of my family, the type of shots that would benefit from Ibis are shots that I rarely take. If you want more insight into this, check out my in-depth explanation on how shutter speed affects my people photography, which is linked up above and also in the description down below. But in general, I want to avoid motion blur of my subject, so that can only be addressed by using an appropriate shutter speed, and it's never really going to be fixed by any amount of stabilization in the camera or in the lens. So this addresses why I don't need or want Ibis for photography, but what about video? After all, I do create YouTube videos like this one after all, right? While personally, I don't vlog that much for this channel, so vlog stabilization when I'm walking around is not a priority for me in my workhorse camera. And when I do vlog or take home videos for my family, I actually use the DJI Osmo Pocket, as I don't like vlogging with a huge camera like the XT series Fujifilm cameras when I'm out with my family. And as far as the B-roll goes for my videos, I have an Edelkrone Slider 1 for my product B-roll shots for my YouTube videos, and I absolutely love it for its predictability, its repeatability, and the fact that it's automated. I can just sip on a beer and just press start, and it shoots my B-roll shots over and over without me having to do much. And I guess the last consideration is, what if I have interest in creating more serious video work for clients and this channel, which includes more complex camera movements, B-roll style shots, for example, this video. Well, guess what? That video that you just saw was shot completely handheld in 60 frames per second, so not even the ultra 120 frames per second slow motion. There was no gimbal, there was no Steadicam, and it was all on my X-T3. And to add to that, it was even done all in manual focus with the slow 56mm 1.2 and the 16mm 1.4 and the slow 35mm 1.4. So I get that Ibis is great for video, but you really can't let that hold you back from creating videos or trying out filmmaking altogether. You gotta just go out and do it and use the gear that you have. And then if you really want to get serious into it, okay, get an X-T4. I'm not gonna blame you. Alright, so now moving on to battery life. At first I thought I was going to have more of a difficult decision with this one, but it's actually not. But you know what, I do have to give kudos to Fuji for fixing this and addressing this complaint that many X-T3 users had. But after seeing the X-T4 as an entire package, the battery life and Ibis alone is not enough to sway me to upgrade. I'm definitely happy and have been fine being more strategic about my battery changes during a long wedding day. So similar to an endurance race car driver that pre-plans their pit stops and their refueling times, I change my batteries before crucial parts of the day. That way I avoid missing moments altogether because I'm already pre-changing out the batteries beforehand. And yes, so while longer battery life and faster autofocus and the just in case ability to have Ibis was a good thing, those factors were not enough to overcome the biggest deal breaker for me when it came to the X-T4, and it's the new tilt screen that they're implementing. So for the X-T4, Fujifilm made the executive decision to transition from the photography-oriented tilt screen, which is similar to the Nikon D750 and the Sony A7 III, and move over to the videography-oriented vlog-style screens like the Canon EOS R and the Panasonic GH cameras. And this is a huge bummer for me as I actually shoot probably even more than 50% of the wedding day with the tilt screen. I rely on it to get a lot of high angle and low angle shots because frankly, I'm a short person and I find the eye level shots that I can get pretty stale and uninspiring. And having the screen in axis at the center of the lens is important to me as it keeps me compact. I can have my arms close. It's more natural to frame those centered compositions that I really like to do. I don't really want the screen to be protruding out to the side, requiring me to shift my head a little bit to compose my shots or to shift my arms a little bit to get that screen centered. It's just not going to really work out naturally or really be conducive to me getting the compositions that I want. And I'll be honest, this is a real shame and it's definitely a big deal breaker, and I'm really scared and I'm doubtful that I'll actually get an X-T5 if they continue down this path of using the kind of side flip out screen moving forward. I really do think that if they wanted to appease videographers and photographers at the same time, they could have adopted the screen style of the X70 or the Sony a6400 that flips all the way up but still lets you do the high angle and low angle shots. But instead they chose to go sideways, and to this all I can do is ultimately, this factor edged me all the way over to choosing to add the X100V to my arsenal and passing on the X-T4 for my wedding photography and personal work. But at the end of the day, these are just my thoughts and my personal preferences. Every photographer and videographer is different, so do what's right for you. If the X-T4 is the right tool for you and for your job, then definitely go for it. I'm going to be happy for you 100% for being able to get that tool that you've been longing for. And if you have the X-T3 or you just bought it recently and your priorities align similar to mine, then I'm hoping that I cured some of your gas pains, your gear acquisition syndrome pains. That way you don't have to spend some money to upgrade when you don't really need to at this point. And if you've been eyeing the X100V and you're not really knowing if you want to get it yet, well, I'm hoping that I offered you a few points that you haven't considered yet. Either way, whatever decision you make, don't let anyone keep you from doing your thing. If this video helped you out to make a decision one way or another, I've got links to all the cameras discussed in the description below if you want to support the channel at no additional cost to you. As always, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I make a new Fujifilm or photography video every week, but if that's too long for you, go ahead and follow me on Instagram at ReggieBPhoto as I'm posting new tutorials, tips, workflow, photography breakdowns throughout the week. Alright, that's it for me. Remember to get out, go shoot, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.